It started with something small. A lunch tray, a quiet child, a moment no one thought would matter. In a crowded school cafeteria, surrounded by noise and laughter, one black student stood frozen as his food was taken from him and thrown away like it meant nothing. Not just the meal, but his dignity. No explanation. No mercy. Just power used without hesitation. The room kept moving, but something had already broken inside that child. Hunger wasn't the worst part. It was the humiliation. The feeling of being singled out, watched, judged, reduced to less than everyone else over something as simple as lunch. What no one in that room knew was that this moment wouldn't stay small for long. Because later that day, the school doors would open again. And when they did, the balance of power would shift in a way no one expected. What happens when quiet humiliation meets unquestionable honor? And how quickly does authority crumble when the truth walks in wearing a uniform? The boy had learned early how to stay small. Not invisible, just careful. Careful with his movements, careful with his voice, careful not to draw attention in places where attention often came with consequences. School was supposed to be safe, but for him, it felt more like a place where rules bent depending on who you were. That morning started like any other. A neatly packed lunch placed gently into his backpack before he left home. It wasn't fancy, but it was familiar. The kind of food that carried comfort, love, and routine. His mother had reminded him to eat slowly and finish everything. His father wasn't home yet. He was away on duty, as he often was. The uniform stayed in the closet, pressed and ready. A quiet symbol of sacrifice the boy never spoke about at school. The cafeteria was loud and crowded when lunchtime came. Trays clattered. Chairs scraped. Kids laughed freely. The boy took his seat, opening his lunch with the same quiet habit he always had. He didn't notice the eyes watching him at first. He never expected to be noticed. The teacher assigned to monitor lunch believed order meant control. Rules were enforced sharply, without patience or flexibility. To her, authority was something to display, not something to earn. She moved through the cafeteria with confidence, scanning for mistakes, pauses, or anything she could correct. When her attention landed on the boy, it stayed there longer than it needed to. Something about his stillness, his quiet, his difference. He didn't understand why he was suddenly standing, why his lunch was no longer in front of him, why the room felt heavier than before. By the time the bell rang, the damage had already been done. The boy walked back to class hungry, humiliated, and silent. He didn't tell anyone. He never did. What he didn't know was that the school would soon face someone who understood discipline, respect, and consequences far better than they did. The rest of the day moved slowly for the boy. Hunger pressed against his stomach, but he ignored it. He had learned how. What stayed heavier was the memory of eyes on him, the feeling of being exposed and powerless in a room full of people who kept eating as if nothing had happened. Every sound felt sharper. Every movement felt watched. In class, he kept his head down. His hands stayed folded on his desk. The teacher's voice blended into the background, but his mind replayed the moment again and again. The sudden attention. The force of authority. The way something meant to nourish him had been discarded without a second thought. It wasn't just about food. It was about being told, without words, that he didn't deserve even that. When the final bell rang, relief should have followed. Instead, dread settled in. He walked home slower than usual, unsure of how to explain what had happened. At home, his mother noticed the untouched snacks, the quiet, the way he avoided eye contact. Eventually, the truth surfaced, not dramatically, not emotionally, but carefully, piece by piece. As if saying it all at once might make it worse. That night, the house felt different, still, focused. His mother listened without interruption. She didn't rush to comfort or dismiss it. She understood what moments like this could do to a child, how they lingered, how they shaped the way someone saw the world. She made a call before dinner was even finished. The next morning, the school went on as usual, unaware of what was already in motion. Teachers gathered papers. Students lined up for attendance. The cafeteria prepared trays like it did every day. But beneath the routine, something was approaching quietly. Deliberately. Mid-morning, the front office received notice of a visitor. Not a parent rushing and angry. Not someone shouting or demanding attention. Just a man who had requested to speak with the administration regarding his child. He arrived alone. When he stepped inside the building, the energy shifted. He walked with posture shaped by years of discipline. His uniform was crisp, pressed, unmistakable. Medals rested where they belonged, earned through service, not given lightly. He didn't announce himself. He didn't need to. Students noticed first. Whispers traveled down hallways. Teachers paused mid-step. There was something about him that demanded attention without asking for it. Respect followed him naturally, pulled by presence alone. The administration greeted him quickly, suddenly aware of the seriousness they hadn't expected. Meetings were rearranged. Schedules adjusted. A situation that had been dismissed the day before was now being examined carefully, cautiously. The cafeteria supervisor was called in. The same teacher who had enforced her authority so confidently the day before now walked slower, unsure why she was being summoned. She assumed it was routine, minor, nothing that required concern. She was wrong. As the father waited, his thoughts stayed steady. He wasn't there for revenge. He wasn't there to raise his voice. He was there for accountability, for his child, for a lesson that extended far beyond one lunch tray. And as the door to the office closed behind the teacher, the truth finally had nowhere left to hide. The room felt smaller as the teacher took her seat. What had once been confidence now sat quietly beneath uncertainty. Across from her, the father remained standing, his uniform sharp and unmoving. The contrast was undeniable. One represented unchecked authority. The other represented earned responsibility. The administration listened as the incident was laid out clearly, carefully, without exaggeration. The moment in the cafeteria. The food taken. The humiliation witnessed by dozens of students. Each detail removed another layer of comfort from the teacher's expression. What she had seen as discipline was now exposed as something else entirely. The father's presence changed everything. Not because of anger, but because of clarity. His service record was acknowledged. His commitment to values like respect, fairness, and protection carried weight that no raised voice ever could. This was not a misunderstanding anymore. It was a failure of judgment. Security footage was reviewed. The cafeteria scene played silently on a screen. A child standing still. An adult acting without hesitation. The image said more than any explanation ever could. The room held its breath as the truth replayed itself from an angle that couldn't be ignored or defended. The teacher shifted. Excuses weakened before they could fully form. The authority she had relied on began to dissolve under scrutiny. For the first time, she wasn't in control of the narrative. The system she trusted to protect her actions was now asking questions. The father never moved closer. He didn't need to. His silence carried more force than confrontation. He was there not just as a parent, but as someone who understood the cost of power when it's misused. He understood how easily dignity could be stripped away and how necessary it was to restore it. Outside the office, staff members waited. Word spread quickly. Students sensed something important was happening. A shift. A reckoning. Decisions were made quietly but firmly. Procedures reviewed. Consequences prepared. What had been dismissed as a minor issue was now recognized as something deeper. something that reflected a larger problem. As the meeting came to an end, one truth stood above the rest. This moment was no longer just about a lunch tray or a single student. It had become a line drawn between authority and fairity and accountability. And the final outcome was about to leave an impact far beyond that school's walls. The outcome came quietly, but it carried weight. The teacher was removed from her position pending review, her actions no longer protected by routine or silence. The school issued a formal acknowledgement of what had happened, recognizing that discipline without humanity was not discipline at all. Policies were revisited, not as paperwork, but as responsibility. For the boy, the days that followed felt different. Not perfect, not instantly healed, but lighter. He returned to school knowing that what happened to him mattered, that his pain had been seen, that his silence had been broken not by shouting, but by truth. He ate his lunch again without fear, surrounded by classmates who now looked at him with a new understanding. At home, his father reminded him that dignity is never something to beg for. It is something to stand in, even when standing feels impossible. The uniform was hung back in the closet, but its meaning remained. Service is not about power. It is about protection, especially of those who cannot protect themselves. The school changed, slowly but noticeably. Teachers became more aware. Students became more vocal. The cafeteria, once a place of quiet humiliation, became a symbol of awareness. A reminder that injustice often hides in ordinary moments, waiting for someone brave enough to challenge it. This was never just one story. It was a reflection of many. Children singled out, authority misused, silence expected. And yet, change began the moment accountability arrived. The most powerful part of this story is not the uniform or the consequences. It is the reminder that respect should never depend on who walks through the door or what they are wearing. It should be given freely, especially to those still learning who they are. How many moments like this go unnoticed every day? And how different would our world look if dignity was protected as fiercely as power? Because justice does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it simply walks in calm, steady, and undeniable.